Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaratari. Yasoda Nandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Panachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaratari. Yasoda Nandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Panachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaratari. Yasoda Nandana Prajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Panachari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kishore Kishori ki jai, Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Marani ki jai, Gonitai ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this morning we're reading from Canto 10, chapter 63, and there are three texts this morning, 22, 23, and 24. So 22 is on the board and we can chant responsibly. Vitravite Bhutagane Tvarastutri Shirastripat Abhyadavata Dasarham Dahan Iva Dishodasham Vitravite Bhutagane Tvarastutri Shirastripat Abhyadavata Dasaram Dahan Iva Dishodasha Vitravite Bhutagane Tvarastutri Shirastripat Adyadhavata Dasaram Dahan Iva Dashodasha. Go ahead. Vitravite Bhutagane Tvarastutri Shirastripat Abhyadhavata Dasaram Anivadishodasha Vitravite Bhutagane Tvarastutri Shirastripat Abhyadavata Dasaram Danam Iva Dashodasham Vitravite Bhutagane Tvarastutri Shirastripat Abhyadavata Dasaram Dahan Iva Dishodasha Vitravite Bhutagane Tvarastutri Shirastripat Abhyadavata Dasaram Dahan Iva Dishodasha. And the word for word, Vitravite, having been driven away. Bhutagane, all the followers of Lord Shiva. Dvara, the personification of fever, who serves him, Lord Shiva. 2, but. 3, Shira, having heads. 3, Pat, having feet. Abhyadavata, ran towards. Dasaram, Lord Krishna. Dahan, burning. Eva, as if it were. Disha, the directions. Dasha, 10. And the translation for text 22 is as follows. After Lord Shiva's followers had been driven away, the Shiva Jvara, who had 3 heads and 3 feet, pressed forward to attack Lord Krishna. As the Shiva Jvara approached, he seemed to burn everything in the 10 directions. And there's a purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti quotes the following description of the Shiva Jvara. Okay, this is small writing. Jvira stri padastri shira, pad bujo, yes, okay. Nara dasan lochana, basma praharano, rudra, kalantaka, yama pamaha. So the terrible Shiva Jvara had 3 legs, 3 heads, 6 arms, and 9 eyes. Showering ashes, he resembled Yamaraj at the time of universal annihilation. And then text 23. Ata Narayana Deva Tam Drishtva Vyastrija Jvaram Maheshvaro Vaishnavascha Yuyudhate Jvaro Upao. And the translation for text 23. Seeing this personified weapon approach, Lord Narayan then released his own personified fever weapon, the Vishnu Jvara. The Shiva Jvara and Vishnu Jvara thus battled each other. Text 24. Maheshvara Sarnakrandan Vaishnavena Badita Alabdhadva Payam Anyatra Pito Maheshvaro Jvaram Sharanarthi Hrishikesham Tushtava Prayatanjalihi. And the translation for text 24. The Shiva Jvara, overwhelmed by the strength of the Vishnu Jvara, cried out in pain, but finding no refuge, the frightened Shiva Jvara approached Lord Krishna, the master of the senses, hoping to attain his shelter. Thus, with joined palms, he began to praise the Lord. And the purport by the BBT. As pointed out by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, it is significant that the Shiva Jvara had to leave the side of his master, Lord Shiva, and directly take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chakshurin Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragutam Vitam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vitam Sha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagat Pate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Roma Padaswami Iti Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Welcome. There's a commentary by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and it's mentioned too in the BBT purport, or the BBT purport is drawn from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, particularly on text 22, which has Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur saying the following. Shiva Jara ran towards Krishna to fight. The form of Shiva Jara is described in the following verse, and there's the Sanskrit. Jvaras Tripadas Tri Shira Sat Bujo Navalochana Basma Praharano Rodra Kalantaka Jamo Pamaha. So the translation for that particular verse, which is describing the Shiva Jvara, is the terrible Shiva Jvara had 3 legs, 3 heads, 6 arms, and 9 eyes. Showering ashes, he resembled Yamaraj at the time of universal annihilation. And the verse actually continues. It's not given by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, but it's given by Srila Jiva Goswami. So I'm going to read the continuation of the verse. So the continuation of the verse is another 2 lines, and I'll give the translation. Nadan megha sahasrasya tulya nirgata nishvanaha nishvasan imbanans cha nidran vitatanur brisham. And this was the continuation of the translation. He breathed like a hurricane and roared like 1,000 clouds. By yawning, he spread sleep everywhere. So that was the continuation of that particular text, which describes the Shiva Jvara. So I thought to draw from Srila Prabhupada's writing, and this is how Srila Prabhupada writes. So he's giving the description of the particular context in which this is happening. So he says, because recall, this is a fight that's now, all the followers of Lord Shiva have fled. And it's a confrontation of Lord Shiva and Lord Krishna. So this is what Srila Prabhupada writes. Being greatly harassed by the arrows of Lord Krishna, all the associates of Lord Shiva, the hobgoblins and ghostly bhutas, pretas, and kshatriyas, notice, left the battlefield. So this echoes text 22. After Lord Shiva's followers had been driven away, that's what the text says. So this is the moment at which this whole scenario is taking place, of this confrontation between these 2 weapons. So Lord Shiva took to his last resort. So all his followers have left, it's just him. And his last resort, as Srila Prabhupada writes, he released his greatest death weapon, known as Shiva Jvara, which destroys by excessive heat. It is said that at the end of creation, the sun becomes 12 times more scorching than usual. I mean, we're suffering a little bit when the temperature's in the 80s, and we recently went to St. Louis. So the temperature there, everybody was telling me, for several days had been 100 degrees, and that persons were really suffering. I've had the experience in Mumbai, when there's such excessive heat, you step out of a building and it feels like you've been hit by a wave of heat. So 12 times greater or more scorching at the time of universal devastation. So this 12 times hotter temperature is called the Shiva Jvara. And So this is Srila Prabhupada doing a breakdown. So this, and that's in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this end of creation, it's described, or we have to look at it a little bit, the description of the end of creation, so that we can understand the comparison that's been made with the Shiva Dvara. And the fact that the Shiva Dvara is showering ashes. So you have a living being that's got this heat that's 12 times the heat of the sun as it is at the present, and it's also showering ashes. So here's a description of what happens at the time of devastation, because there's a comparison that's made with the Shiva Dvara at that time. So at the time of the final devastation of the complete universe, the end of the duration of Brahma's life, a flame of fire emanates from the mouth of Ananta, from the bottom of the universe. So there's the end of devastation. The yogi sees all the planets of the universe burning to ashes, and thus he leaves for Satyaloka by airplanes used by the great purified souls. The duration of life in Satyaloka is calculated to be, and this figure is completely unpronounceable, but it's 50,480,000 and then 6 more zeros, so trillions a years. So that's from Srimad Bhagavatam in the second canto, in the second chapter, describing that particular moment at the end of the devastation, or the devastation of the universe. So this flame coming from the mouth of Ananta, from the bottom of the universe, so it causes all the yogis to flee upwards to the highest planet on their airplanes, because in the highest planets, life duration is terribly long. In fact, in solar years, it's described as 4,300 million years. So we have this petty life of 100 years. And when you look at it, in the higher planets, it's 4,300 million years. So, so these purified beings that do at the time of devastation take to their aeroplanes to ascend to the highest realm, Satyaloka, these are actually the demigods. They're referred to as the purified beings in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So it may be noted that there actually are several devastations that take place in the life of Lord Brahma. There's a devastation in Brahma's day. There's another one during his sleep. And then there's this third one that I've just read, which is the devastation at the time when Brahma dies. So there's actually several of them that take place. And that's Srila Prabhupada in Life Comes From Life. He mentions that particular fact. So one can give consideration to the followers of Lord Shiva, whose departure due to Lord Krishna's arrows had Lord Shiva resort to using the Shiva Dvara. So a distinction can be made between these demigods that I've just described and how they deal with the universal devastation, and the demons, the asuras, in that the demigods are all devotees of Lord Vishnu, whereas the demons are all devotees of demigods, like Lord Shiva, Goddess Kali, and Goddess Durga. Well, actually, I know somebody who's a devotee of Goddess Durga, and I'm not sure if I describe the person as a demon, but generally, the demons are the ones who take shelter of the demigods, and the demigods are the ones who are taking shelter of Lord Vishnu. So sometimes the demons are also devotees of Lord Brahma, and there's the example of Hiranyakashipu. He was a devotee of Lord Brahma. And Banasura, who's the, basically you could say the cause that leads to this final confrontation, he was a devotee of Lord Shiva, and Ravana was too. So it's to oppose the devotees of Lord Vishnu, that the demons become devotees of Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, Goddess Kali, and Goddess Durga. Isn't that interesting? They're going for shelter in order to oppose Lord Vishnu to the very ones that are completely devoted to Lord Vishnu. So the devotees of Lord Shiva and Goddess Durga are always envious of Vaishnavas who are devotees of Lord Vishnu. That's a generalization that's made by Srila Prabhupada. They're actually always envious of Vaishnavas. So now there was, to deal with this problem that is generally happening, all these demons that are envious of Vaishnavas and the demigods giving them shelter, the demigods have to actually also get some help. So there's a description of this protective covering that was created for the demigods by a Vishvarupa. And this covering was saturated with Vishnu mantras. So that's how their protection is there for the demigods. So this Vishnu mantra is sometimes called the Vishnu Jvara. So actually it's an extremely subtle weapon, you could say, or protective shield. It's actually composed of mantras created by Vishvarup. It's kind of a protective covering for the demigods. So this is described. The opulence of the demons, who generally are known as the enemies of the demigods, was protected by the talents and methods by Sukracharya. He was the spiritual master of the demons. So he always had some tactic. I mean, we hear when he was dealing with Lord Vishnu coming and wanting 3 steps of land, how the tactics he used. So that's how he's characterized as always having some tactics for how to deal with protecting the demons. So he was extremely powerful, and he composed a protective prayer, you could say. But it was Vishvarup who was the most powerful, because his protective prayer was the one that created this entire shield for all the demigods, and that's Narayan Kavacha. And by this intelligent mantra, he took away the opulence of the demons. So that's the purpose of the Narayan Kavacha. It actually destroys the opulence of the demons. And Vishvarup, when he created this protective shield, he gave it to Mahendra, the king of heaven. So usually we hear of Indra, so it's a particular time period, Mahendra. So that's described in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So there's a further mention of the glories of this prayer, this Narayan Kavacha. So the prayer, Narayan Kavacha, constitutes subtle knowledge transcendently connected with Narayan. And one who employs this prayer is never disturbed or put in danger by the government, by plunderers, by evil demons, or any type of disease. So very powerful, the Narayan Kavacha. And this is explained by Vishvarup when he creates this protective shield for the demigods. He explains this to Lord Indra or Lord Mahendra. So the question can be raised, when you're looking at the value of something, because I've given some description here of the effects of receiving this protective layer on the part of the demigods. So if one were to look at the value of something, you could ask the question, let's say if you were just considering hypothetically, if there are people you don't care for, would you prefer knowing how to hurt them or knowing how to keep them from hurting you? This is, a question that may come to mind when you're considering the value of something. Is it better to get something that allows you to hurt those that that are opposed to you, or is it actually better that you know how to prevent yourself from getting hurt? I mean, it's a question when you look at the value of something. And here's Srila Prabhupada writing. As there is a Shiva Jvara weapon, there's also a Narayan Jvara weapon, which is represented by excessive cold. Where there is excessive heat, one can somehow or other tolerate it. But when there is excessive cold, everything collapses. This is actually experienced by a person at death. This is Srila Prabhupada. At the time of death, the temperature of the body rises first of all to 107 degrees Fahrenheit, and then the whole body collapses and immediately becomes as cold as ice. To counteract the scorching heat of the Shiva Jvara, there is no other weapon than the Narayan Jvara. So actually, it would seem that the value lies in the fact that the demigods have this weapon that protects them. And Lord Vishnu, you could say, the weapon has a protective function. Rather than hurting, it has a protective function. So in text 23, where there's this knowing how to prevent demons from hurting one, Srila Vishwanath comments, Krishna sent forth the cold fever weapon. So notice, it's referred to as a cold fever because it's ongoing and it's got a relentlessness about it. Because that's how you have to actually, it has to serve the purpose of protection, because the Shiva Jvara has the relentless heat. So then the Vishnu Jvara has to have the relentless cold. So interesting that it's serving a protective function rather than a hurting function. Although we do come to hear that the Shiva Jvara cries out in pain. So Srila Prabhupada notes that when Lord Krishna saw that the Shiva Jvara had been released by Lord Shiva, he had no recourse other than to release the Narayan Jvara. So Lord Krishna is the original Narayan and the controller of the Narayan Jvara weapon. That's the thing to be understood. Then one moves to text 24, where the Narayan Jvara was released. So there was a great fight that happened between the two Jvaras. And Srila Prabhupada explains it this way. When excessive heat is counteracted by extreme cold, it is natural for the hot temperature to gradually reduce. And this is what occurred in the fight between Lord Shiva or the Shiva Jvara and the Narayan Jvara or Lord Vishnu. So gradually the Shiva Jvara's temperature diminished and the Shiva Jvara began to cry for help. So it's interesting, it's like the weapon, the very, you could say person weapon, it actually, part of its being is to be excessively hot, 12 times the normal heat of the sun. So when it was actually being counteracted by excessive cold, it actually was causing pain to its being. So, but Lord Shiva was unable to help. So there's the poor Shiva Jvara crying out in pain, and Lord Shiva cannot help. And the reason he can't help is because Lord Shiva's in the presence of the Narayan Jvara. So the same respect and devotion that he has for Lord Krishna, Lord Narayan, he has towards the Narayan Dvara, so he can't actually oppose it, personally try and help the Shiva Dvara. He just stands back. And so the Shiva Dvara understands that actually he has no means of escape outside of surrendering unto Lord Narayan. So interesting, the weapon being person and having capacity to comprehend is understanding that actually he's now going to have to surrender to the person, Lord Narayan, the person whose weapon is causing him this great pain. So he left Lord Shiva's side and directly took shelter of Lord Krishna. So greatly frightened is how the Shiva Dvara is described. He fell to the ground and offered his respects to Lord Krishna. And folding his hands, he praised the Lord with devotion. So it was just natural. I mean, he's coming from Lord Shiva and taking into account that the fact that the demigods are all devotees of Lord Vishnu, Lord Krishna, Lord Narayan. Here is the weapon coming, comprehending that he can't oppose the weapon coming from Lord Vishnu. So then his master is devoted to Lord Vishnu, and now he offers obeisances immediately with devotion to Lord Vishnu, Lord Narayan, Lord Krishna in this case. So very extraordinary. And meaning that the comprehension immediately translates into action. And that's he's so closely associated with Lord Shiva that it's just natural. It's an extension of Lord Shiva. So the devotion of Lord Shiva is manifest also in the Shiva Dvara. So Srila Prabhupada further explains. He says this: Lord Shiva, the greatest of the demigods, could not help him, what to speak of the lesser demigods, and therefore the Shiva Dvara ultimately surrendered unto Krishna, bowing before him and offering a prayer so that the Lord might be pleased and give him protection. So there was a motive for the prayer. He wanted to be protected, stop the excessive cold. So the conclusion reached by Srila Prabhupada is the following. This incident of the fight between the ultimate weapons of Lord Shiva and Lord Krishna proves that if Lord Krishna gives someone protection, no one can kill him. And if Krishna does not give protection, no one can save him. So that's a conclusion on the part of Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada further explains, both Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva act in one capacity only. Lord Brahma can create and Lord Shiva can annihilate, but neither of them can maintain. So Lord Vishnu not only creates and annihilates, but he also maintains. So they have very specific functions, and so it means there's a restriction on their capacity. So one can understand that they look to the greater personality who functions much more comprehensively. So factually, the creation is not affected, this is Srila Prabhupada, by Brahma, because Brahma himself is created by Lord Vishnu, and Lord Shiva is created or born of Lord Brahma. So in each case, they're not, they don't have the full comprehensive control of the universe. It's only Lord Vishnu who does that, who has that. So the Shiva Dvara thus understood that without Krishna or Narayan, no one could help him. And he therefore rightly took shelter of Lord Krishna and folded hands began to pray. And we're going to hear in the next couple of days what his prayers were. But often the question is asked about what makes up someone's beliefs and values. This is a question that gets asked because here we're dealing with, the decision that's made by the personified weapon of Lord Shiva. So you can ask the question, what makes up somebody's beliefs and values? So the thought generally is that values are characteristic of the individual. So that when one comes to believe something in one area of one's life, that's what one attributes value to. That's the value you hold. So the prayers to the Supreme Lord for protection are exemplified in the Narayan Kavacha. So here is you getting some understanding of how belief influences the value you place on something. So the demigods place great value on the Narayan Kavacha, or the shield that gives them protection through mantras. So I'm going to read 3 of these mantras. So here's one of them. The Supreme Lord, who sits on the back of a bird Garuda, touching him with his lotus feet, holds 8 weapons: the conch shell, disc, shield, sword, club, arrows, bow, and ropes. May that Supreme Personality of Godhead protect me at all times with his 8 arms. He is all powerful because he fully possesses the 8 mystic powers, anima, lagima, etc. So there's one of the mantras. So this prayer is one when one is thinking of oneself as being qualitatively one with the Lord, understanding that as a spirit soul, one can meditate upon the Supreme Lord as described in this prayer. So continuing, here's another one of the mantras that make up this Narayan Kavacha that the demigods rely on, and based on their belief system, they're placing such value on it. May the Lord, who assumes the body of a great fish, protect me in the water from the fierce animals that are associates of the demigod Varuna. By expanding his illusory energy, the Lord assumed the form of the dwarf Vamana. May Vamana protect me on the land, since the gigantic form of the Lord, Vishvarupa, conquers the 3 worlds. May he protect me in the sky. So this mantra seeks the protection of the Lord in the water, the land, and the sky, particularly in his incarnation as the fish, as Vamanadev and Vishvarupa. And then the next mantra I'm going to read, that's part of this Narayan Kavacha, it's actually applicable to everyone. And one of the things that happens in the temple, particularly in the Chicago temple, is that persons get extremely agitated when they hear of some crime in the neighborhood. So somebody fires a rubber bullet and the whole community is in turmoil. There's a homeless person living alongside the temple. Somebody is afraid now to walk down the street because they're going to pass that homeless person. So such turmoil happens just because there's some possibility of danger. So the danger doesn't actually impact one, but the mind believes there's great danger because there are these unknown elements. So here's a part of the Narayan Kavacha that may be very useful to all persons who have this tendency to let their mind go in the direction of hypothesizing that the fear is going to manifest in something. So I'm going to read the Sanskrit and then the translation for this particular prayer, because I think it's a prayer, particularly being in the Chicago temple and knowing the sensitivity of the community. Rakshato aso madvani yagya kalpa Shiva damstrayonita daro varaha Ramo drikuteshu ata vipravase salakshmano jyad bharatagrajo sman. So here's the translation. So it's a mantra. The supreme indestructible Lord is ascertained through the performance of ritualistic sacrifices and is therefore known as Yogeshvar. In his incarnation as Lord Boar, he raised the planet Earth from the water at the bottom of the universe and kept it on his pointed tusks. May that Lord protect me from rogues on the street. May Pashuram protect me on the tops of mountains. And may the elder brother of Bharata, Lord Ramachandra, along with his brother Lakshman, protect me in foreign countries. So, for all the persons who are fearing the street, Lant Avenue maybe, the alleyway behind the temple, here is the mantra. So praying that the Lord can protect one from the rogues on the street. And particularly remembering Lord Boar, who's lifting the earth on his tusks. One can remember that the Lord uplifts one, so one is actually raised up from any possible danger from any rogue on the flat walking surface of the street. So, and there's a last prayer that I'll read from the Narayan Kavacha shield that the demigods have access to, that's their protection from the demons. May the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his incarnation as Dhanvantari, relieve me from undesirable eatables and protect me from physical illness. May Lord Rishabdev, who conquered his inner and outer senses, protect me from fear produced by the duality of heat and cold. Also very relevant here. May Yagya protect me from defamation and harm from the populace. And may Lord Balaram as Shesha protect me from envious serpents. And that's mantra in Sanskrit. Dhanvantari Bhagavan Pat Apati, Dhanvad Bayad Rishabo Nirjitatma, Yagnas Cha, and my computer changed something to English, sorry, Avatar Janantad, Baloganas Kroda Vasad Ahindraha. So there's the prayer for, even praying for protection from heat and cold. Yeah, and particularly from Lord Rishabdev. So Lord Rishabdev is one that one remembers because of the fact that he was able to control his own senses. And that's part of one's suffering. One is actually allowing one's senses to actually get the better of one. So one always has to step back and be more objective. So even if it is excessive heat or excessive cold, there's that necessity to pull back one's senses and not actually go with where the senses are, oh, I'm suffering, or this is excessively hot or excessively cold. So this was the very simplistic class I was able to get from these three verses. If there's any thought that can expand it, I'd be most grateful. Or question or further idea that comes.
Thanks, Krishnarcana. Was you thinking the remarkable arrangement that Lord Shiva does in order to glorify Krishna, to to show or showcase Krishna's superiority and supremacy, and the fact that a good fight was put forward, and he released his ultimate weapon, which is the weapon that is released at the time of devastation. It's explained that Lord Shiva at the time of devastation, he does that dance, and then the whole thing burns. And that ultimate weapon of Lord Shiva, the fact that goes through this process of surrendering to Krishna, is a very graphic demonstration of Lord Shiva total surrender and to Krishna's position. So it's quite wonderful in one sense. It was Lord Shiva's purpose from the very beginning, and here's coming to a conclusion on that once it comes from the Lord Shiva's chastising Vanasura and saying, my master will take away all your pride. What is it? Release you?
Yeah, your conceit, he actually is the word he uses.
Yeah, so he will be released of all that. And now, you will face him and he will take away all that. So And the premise is that Banasura say no one is equal to, basically you're the only one who can face me. In other words, no one is equal than me, from the side of Banasura. So Lord Shiva say, no, Krishna is supreme. So it's quite.
Yes, and it's interesting because the just prior to this one, here's that Banasura had already fled the battlefield. So, so Lord Shiva is releasing his ultimate weapon, and then the weapon itself surrenders to Lord Krishna. So Banasura at that moment he's already gone.
Nasura has been utterly humiliated. Just the fact that his mama has to come to rescue him. That's the ultimate humiliation. Huh? No, no, no. This one was.
Her name was Kotara.
Uh,
Thank you, Subal.
I don't know if anyone noticed in the verse 22, there's the 369. 369. I don't know if anybody noticed that. So we know that 369 is actually manifestation number, which was discovered by Nikola Tesla. So I was just looking, I was reading, I said, this is very interesting. Three, the 3 legs, 6 arms, and the 9 eyes. Obviously, during this time in the Vedic tradition, um, even the demons, which they do now, they use auspicious numbers, right? Such as 11, 22, and 29. So here you have this 369. I thought it was very interesting. And there's a correlation for each number, but 9 specifically it's like a surrendering to the divine. 6 is as well. So interestingly enough, Shiva Dwara uh, being defeated, there's this process of surrender. And of course, it's a personality. Weapons are personalities, right? It's an entity, and it's serving its master. But in this particular case, there was an ultimate master, and it had to surrender. Heat, giving the benefit of the cold. But I just thought it was striking. Um, Sometimes this is referred to as externography. So you have these hidden things that are placed right in plain sight, and unless you are familiar with these things. So I could have easily skipped over it, but I'm like, wait a minute, wait a 3. I kept looking at it. So I thought that was very interesting. I'm sure there's probably more meaning into that. And we have mula mantras and things like that. Things are done with numbers. Everything has significance. But this in particular um, struck me very, very surprisingly that it shouldn't, but it struck me that this number was there, 369.
Yes, I'm not so familiar with the significance of numbers and the indicators of numbers, but I recall one time actually I attended a seminar in New York, somewhere on the Upper East Side, and the persons were dealing with exactly that, the significance of numbers, be it one's, birth date, etc., etc. And if you were going to live in a house, what was the number of the house, and your telephone number, all sorts of things. They would add it up, and then what it would come to, and then what it meant. So, there is certainly a whole science to that. I don't know it very well. I know that like in a chart that was done for me personally, somehow the number 5 is very prominent. And what it indicates is that I've got numerous choices in everything in my life. So I found that is actually accurate. So I guess there are persons who know that's art of correlating numbers and the significance of numbers. In terms of deity worship, the usually one is it's auspicious to offer in odd numbers. So one may offer 3 flowers or 5 flowers, but you don't offer 2 flowers or 4 flowers. And the same thing, with incense, or so there's and then often we're chanting mantras, like in offering our food stuff, it'll be done 3 times. So that odd number is the preferred, more auspicious number versus the even number. It's not you chant the mantra 2 times; it's 3 times.
Yeah, and I was also thinking that when we do circumambulation, that's also 3. Yeah, it's all in there in days in which, like Krishna's birth, the time, Lord Chaitanya's birth, the time, the place, everything is alignment with astrology. So like that. So all these things, um, the Ekadashi, there's an 11 number. If it's always the 11th day after the waxing of the waning moon. So that's another powerful number, which is 11. So again, I would have skipped over this and looked at that because the way they broke it up. But if you look at it, it's 369.
Yes, there is something, you sort of imagine a very diminutive weapon somehow in the description. But clearly, whatever the size was of the Shiva Jvara, the incredible power that went with the 3 legs, 6 arms, 9 eyes, and particularly the arms because of the flinging of these ashes. Yeah, it's the uneven numbers again sort of stick out of the eyes and the legs, because it's unusual to have 3 legs, but yeah.
Well, everything is reduced. Everything is reduced to 3. So that's why you see the multiples, 3, 6, 9. And just like when you have the number 11, you have 11, 22, and 29. They're all done in those multiples. So the number's reduced to even the birth date. If you have a birth date, it's 12. Then they reduced the 12 to 3. So I think it's called sacred geometry or something like that. So
Yeah,
it's a science.
It's an art,
Yeah.
some sort of art.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for that contribution, Chandra Prabhu. So there's nothing else. Thank you very much for your very kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.